All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. This week we are thrilled to be joined with one of the biggest interviews we've ever had on the show here. This week we have former Speaker of the House and current Republican candidate for governor, Catherine Hanaway.
Scott, thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Let's just start with the first thing, the question that I think our viewers want to know first. You've started the campaign again. You're out collecting supporters. There was the ad that was ran against Tom Schweik by a third-party committee. It's called him some names. Different folks had different takes on the ad, but the question is, did you know about the ad? Did you coordinate with the ad? Is there anything going to come out showing you knew this ad happened or helped in its formation?
I didn't know this ad was going to run. I actually learned about it when we were in a campaign meeting and somebody walked in and said, this ad's on the air. It wasn't my style. It wasn't the kind of ad I would have put up. We did report it as an in-kind contribution after we learned of Axiom's, after I learned of Axiom's involvement in it, because that's the kind of campaign I want to run, a stand-up campaign. I've had a very serious conversation with my consultants and said, look, there aren't going to be any more third parties doing things in this campaign with my consultants, or you're not going to be my consultants anymore. And I think everybody understands that. I want to be governor because I think I've got a very positive vision for where Missouri can go, and that's what we're going to be talking about.
Well, lastly on the topic, you've been in a situation that's almost unheard of in politics. Give us your take a couple months later about Tom Schweik's passing, the person, and some people tried to read in a bigger question about politics. Give us your take. How does this leave you feeling after what's happened?
Well, it leaves me very sad for Tom's family, for the loss to Missouri. Tom was a superb public servant, and he was a tough competitor. He was my competitor, but I always admired his intellect, his work ethic, his drive, and so it is a loss for the state, but particularly for his family. And you're right, I've not been through anything like this. None of us have. But politics happens in the context of life, so I have been through the passing of Mel Carnahan in a tragic plane crash. When I was in the House, we lost members to just diseases of life, and it's awful in every instance. There's no good way for someone to lose their life untimely. And so we need to keep Tom's family and Spence's family in our prayers, but we need to continue to also focus on what they devoted their lives to, which was making Missouri a better place. You've
taken tough hits before. When you were Speaker, there was your hometown paper, the editorial board, pretty much dedicated to anything they could, as JohnCombest.com says, the weekly list of Republican transgressions. I mean, you've taken hits before. As the campaign moves forward, you know, you'll be hit. You'll have to fire back. On the campaign trailer, what's the initial reaction to that? Do people understand this? And as you move forward with the campaign, how is it going? The campaign, since we've been back out on the trail, which has been about 3 weeks now, is really going well. We've been to a lot of Lincoln Days around the state. People are enthusiastic about the possibility of getting some things done, reforming our taxes, reducing our regulations, putting people back to work.
prioritizing things in state government. We have problems in our schools. We have problems with our roads, and we need somebody leading from the governor's mansion, and that's what people are excited about. They're excited about the cause of bringing conservative principles to the governor's mansion.
All right, this may be the only show you get asked. The big three Republican issues. Will Governor Hanaway cut taxes?
Governor Hanaway will absolutely shrink the size of Missouri government, and I think as you do that, you have the opportunity to cut taxes. But government needs to do a few things and do them well, and it's important that we address both sides of that equation. So in terms of prioritizing, schools, roads, jobs, those are my three priorities. That's what we're going to focus on. Everything else, we're going to look at to see if we can reduce the amount of money we're spending on those things.
Isn't there a way to limit the burden of government to create jobs?
Oh, for sure. I think we have to have meaningful tort reform, and we all say that. What does it mean? It means that the courts in this state will no longer hold employers hostage to a regulatory scheme that just costs far too much money. So not only do we have to probably reform the Missouri Constitution and statutes, but you have to have a governor who's going to appoint conservative, business-oriented judges. Right to work. We need right to work in Missouri. And we also need to reform the tax code. The mode of taxation matters. We're too reliant on income taxes. So those are some real meaningful steps we can take today to get the state going.
With right to work, I mean, if you're an employer and you own a business, say like in Butler County, Missouri,
right,
wouldn't you much rather just get government off your back than worrying about some theoretical union workforce that you don't even see or know about?
You're absolutely right, and I'll give you just one example of how big the regulatory burden is in Missouri. There are 10,000 words in the regulation that governs barbers. That's how many words there are in the book of Revelations.
In an age of Facebook, don't you know if you have a good barber or not?
Exactly. And, you know, you mentioned Facebook. Uber's a great example for people in the metropolitan areas. They travel all over the country. They can call Uber, get a reliable, inexpensive car service immediately. You can't do it in St. Louis because of the taxi
That was
commission.
my subtle plug for Vine Street Barbershop in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. I recommend everyone visit it. Number 2 on the list.
Based on your haircut?
Well, they don't have much to work with, so they shine it up. So, number 2 on the list, pro-life issues. You've always been a staunch advocate for pro-life causes. I assume your administration would be the same. What can you do outside of changing Roe versus Wade on the issue of life?
Well, we need to make sure that moms know they have alternatives. And my husband and I have an adopted son. I absolutely would promote adoption and promote the kinds of organizations like Our Ladies Inn that take care of women who don't have, feel like they don't have any other alternatives because of the circumstances they find themselves in. The legislature has made good progress on getting rid of public funding and putting in waiting periods, but we need to also make sure that women understand that abortion is their worst option.
Do you think as a woman that you have a better way to communicate the pro-life message for the Republican Party?
I don't know about that. I think that I communicate the pro-life message well because I sincerely believe it in my heart that it's the first and most important right that any of us have, the right to exist, the right to life.
The third issue on the list, I think that would make any Republican primary voters list of issues is the Second Amendment. You have a vote that all of your opponents will blow up every reporter's cell phone telling them about on concealed carry, I believe.
Yes.
Can you explain that vote, and how do you convince a person that that's their top issue, of which there's many that are, that your administration will be a staunch defender of the Second Amendment?
Well, what people who care about the Second Amendment need to remember about me is that for years the Democrats had talked about passing concealed carry in Missouri. And it wasn't until I led the effort to take a majority, and we took the majority, that we passed concealed carry, and I supported concealed carry while I was Speaker. We passed the bill. Governor Holden vetoed it. We overrode that veto. And at the time, we were a long ways from veto-proof majority, so we had to persuade a lot of Democrats to come with us. And we made concealed carry the law in Missouri for the first time ever under my leadership. That's what's important about my record on concealed carry. Now, the vote you're asking about happened after, in 1999, we'd had a statewide vote on concealed carry. I represented a district in St. Louis County that had rejected that measure by nearly 70%. So I felt an obligation to reflect the views of my constituents when I was voting for it when it came up after that.
You mentioned governing. You were the first Republican speaker in most people's lifetimes. The campaign part of that, incredibly complex. Talk about governing. I mean, you're going to be running to govern. Talk about governing as the first speaker.
Well, the most important thing we did was, in the context of the campaign, we laid out the agenda for what we would do when we would take the majority. And it really was an agenda based on restoring trust in state government. And at the time, Missourians felt like promises to them had been severely broken with respect to roads and schools, that the money that they had paid in increased taxes or through the lottery for each of those things, that trust had been breached, and no one was trying to restore that trust. So when we became the majority party, it was a whole different ballgame. It's one thing to sit in the minority and throw bombs and spew rhetoric. It's entirely a different thing. And when I became speaker, there hadn't been a Republican speaker in 48 years. There was no living Republican speaker I could call and say, hey, how do you do this? So of course I had to learn the nuts and bolts, but the important thing was to restore that trust that voters had, that some of their representatives really did intend to make good on their promises. And that meant setting a clear agenda and, frankly, kind of moving to the side the things that weren't the priorities. And those were probably the biggest fights I had, because everybody comes to Jeff City with a bright idea. But as a leader, you've got to say, this is what we're going to get done. This is the hill we're going to take. Follow me. And that's what we did. And Peter Kinder was a great partner as President Pro Tem of the Senate. But it is very different than sitting in the back and just telling the leadership what's going wrong.
On the campaign trail, you have some rumored opponents. Have you met these folks? Do you know them? Have you had a conversation with them? Do you expect this to be a clean race?
I have met all of them. Some of them I know very well and have known for a very long time. They're good men, and right now, at least, they're all men who are thinking about getting in, a variety of backgrounds. I think what probably distinguishes me from them is that I've had the experience of transforming state government once, to go from being the minority party to being the majority party, not only to lead the campaign efforts, but to lead the transition to governing. Have that experience. But I also haven't run for office in 11 years. And so I think the experience that I've had, sort of living life as every Missourian does, raising our family, making a living, I think that experience is critical to being a good governor.
So the Republican activist, if you win the primary, you'll be running against a very strong candidate.
Yes.
Why are you the best person to take on Chris Koster?
Well, I think because I have that blend of experience. I haven't spent my whole life holding office. I have had the experiences that every Missourian's had, you know, staying up all night with a sick kid, going to parent-teacher conferences, being at ball games. All of those are experiences that are cherished by Missourians. And frankly, the reason I'm running is for those parents around Missouri who want their kids to have a future here. We've got to make sure we have quality jobs for them to take. So I think in terms of stacking up against Chris Koster, he spent really literally his entire adult life holding one office or another. I think Missourians want to have a conversation that's about what goes on in their actual day-to-day lives, not just the inside. It's not a beltway, but it's certainly a bubble in Jeff City.
Yeah, it's a section of streets more like
exactly.
inside the 3-block air radius. We'll also call you Madam Speaker. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it.
And up next, we'll get the reactions to this interview with our opinion maker panel. Stay tuned.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
And welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're now joined by our opinion maker panel, led it off by Brittany Burke, the head of the public relations firm Tactas, one of the leading PR opinion makers in the state. Ryan Johnson, the head of the Missouri Alliance for Freedom, one of the biggest growing, I would say the fastest growing conservative group in the state. Michael Sean Kelley, MSK of KMOX fame, the Kelley Group, Show Me Strategies, 4 or 5 other things you own. Sure. Media magnet.
Just trying to be like you.
You're doing a great job. Put on a little more weight, I think, is the key. And rising star in the Republican Party, Representative Travis Fitzwater from Callaway County in mid-Missouri. And Representative, we'll start with you. Great. You heard the interview by candidate Hanaway. What'd you think?
Well, I think a number of things. One, she's really talented. I mean, she's impressive. She's been, you know, thanks to her, we have a Republican majority, historic Republican majority in the House. She started it in 2002 for us as Speaker. And just phenomenal. She's a phenomenal lady and leader, and just really appreciate the groundwork she's laid for us as a party.
Brittany Burke, you might know better than anybody here how the public is going to take that. How did she answer the first 2 questions about everything that's happened earlier this spring?
Well, I think everything that happened earlier this spring, while it was very public, was also very much inside baseball. I think it's great that she said to her consultants, call out the dogs, no third party, no more attacks like that. Fact of the matter is, that's the business. And unless the 10 other people running for to be the Republican candidate for governor in 2016 do the same thing.
Is it the 10 now? Is it 10?
I quite frankly can't keep track. I really have no idea how many it is. But unless all the other candidates do the same thing, unfortunately, she's putting herself on an unfair playing field. That's the business. And until constituents get engaged, it's not going to change.
MSK, are you considering throwing in for the Republican nomination for governor?
No, I'm not.
You're not on the 10?
And I don't even believe that Catherine Hanaway really is. Look, if you look back at the history of Catherine Hanaway, this is one of the most focused, incredible politicians the state of Missouri had ever seen. She single-handedly took back the legislature for the Republicans that, like you said, had not been done in a lifetime. If you look at her campaign since she's announced, kind of feeblishly at the start, she's essentially raised money from one individual. She's not out working this. She's not out raising money. I don't think Catherine Hanaway is going to make it to the gate. I don't believe that she's running. Now, she's got some good platforms that she talked about. I think they're in direct conflict with where the Republican legislature is in Jefferson City, and I think that's going to be a hard selling point for her moving forward.
Ryan Johnson, she has to convince your members probably to win this nomination, at least a good chunk of them, that she's the right candidate to go against Chris Koster. Did she take steps toward doing that today?
You know, Mike makes a good point. I think that her focus and her ability to really engage donor momentum will really be the deciding factor. In terms of the rhetoric that we heard today, she hit all the right points. But what we need to find out, though, is can she raise the money and compete with the other gentlemen in the race in order to put enough rounds down range in order to be able to secure the vote, because she doesn't have enough shoe leather, enough tire tread to make it around the state to talk to enough people. She's got to be on the air, she's got to be in the mail, she's got to be in the media, and she's got to be able to make the case. And for that to happen, there has to be a renewed focus, I think.
Of the candidates that are being mentioned, who would be the front runner now for your members?
You know, Republican primaries are funny things. You've got about 4 different buckets where you procure votes from. You have the establishment bucket, and that's probably, you know, the biggest. You have the libertarians, which are kind of your Rand Pauls. You have your Ted Cruz bucket, which tends to be your Tea Party. You know, and then you have your traditional Christian conservatives, which is probably your second biggest. So I think Catherine makes a strong play for the establishment as well as your traditional conservatives. But in terms of who goes after and is able to get the Tea Party or the Rand Paul vote, for instance, the Libertarian wing, you know, I think right now John Bruner's probably the strongest positioned. Now, having said that, Eric Greitens, who's also flirting with the idea of getting in the race, has people like Paul Kurtman, John Lamping, and those kinds of people already coalescing around him as well. So he'll make a strong play for that as well.
Senator Lamping, right? Former Senator Lamping.
Huge, huge.
Representative, last to you. Your colleagues in the House, she built a lot of the majority that you enjoy. How is she received there? Where will the majority of your colleagues fall?
That's a really interesting conversation right now because everybody's kind of jockeying for position. John Brunner was in the building the other day. I know Eric Greitens was in the building recently. Peter Kinder's always over there, and I think he's a name that's coming up a little more nowadays. So I think people are keeping their powder dry for the most part and trying to figure out where does this actually end? Who's actually going to be in it? Who's in it for the long haul? And then coalesce after that.
Michael Kelley, moving forward to bigger 2016 politics, which one of these are the best person to take on Chris Koster?
Well, I would think Catherine Hanaway probably is best positioned. Look, I know that the legislature is balanced very heavily Republican. But when you look at the voters of the state of Missouri, this is pretty much a 50-50 state. You're going to have someone who can compete in the suburbs in St. Charles and Jefferson County, Eastern Jackson County, Greene County, Boone County. And while a lot of the other Republicans that are running appeal to the Republican base, it's those soccer moms in St. Charles and Jefferson County that a candidate's going to need to appeal to. And I think Catherine Hanaway is probably likely best positioned to appeal to those people as a Republican.
Brittany, Burke, who's Koster's hardest draw?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I really think the amount of discussion and attention that's been put forward who the Republican nominee for governor in the state is for 2016 is almost asinine. I think the primary is in August. That's tons of time left, and we have no idea who the front runner is. I think if the primary was tomorrow, it's Kinder, simply on name ID, his ability to usually come out ahead, and he wins. He gets things done. That being said, whoever is the candidate, they can't sit at any table or go on any show and talk about how they're going to decrease taxes and then say that transportation and roads are important. We've got a serious revenue problem, and those two talking points just don't go hand in hand anymore.
Right, Justin, who's the best candidate to take on Chris Koster?
Just in terms of brand, I think Catherine Hanaway, honestly. I agree again. I think in terms of being able to compete and outstate, to compete in the suburbs, to compete with the soccer moms, I think Catherine Hanaway provides a nice natural contrast. You have a strong woman who can also match his prosecutorial experience. She's a traditional Christian conservative, whereas General Koster doesn't necessarily enjoy that reputation. So in terms of just head-to-head, she provides, I think, the best natural contrast. But again, it's going to come down to money.
Does Chris Koster have a chance to compete with some of your members? Former Republican state senator, former prosecutor, excellent record on the Second Amendment.
I'm from Cass County. He was our Cass County prosecutor. He was a Republican then, and he was our fair-haired guy. We were ready to see him go all the way to the White House. And the thing about Chris Koster is, if you know Chris, the man knows he will be president one day. I don't think he just aspires to be. I think he knows that he will be that one day.
Well, he's sort of teed up. He's in that position Eric Schmidt's in now as the next big Missouri politician.
You have it.
He switched parties. Do you think he regrets it?
I don't think so. As long as he has a clear path to the White House, I don't think he matters which party he's in.
Well, what about the Rams? Rams came forward with a proposal today. The pictures look beautiful. A lot of discussion on the money. You've been vocal on this issue. What do you think?
I don't think it's the role of government to hand over your tax dollars and give it to the Rams. The NFL is going to do $10 billion in revenue this year. I don't think they need our help funding a stadium.
Every dollar they spend on a stadium, they don't spend harassing a business owner. Michael Kelley, I think you have an opinion on this.
Well, I'm supportive of keeping the Rams. We in Missouri, and specifically the St. Louis area, have a serious perception problem. We have constantly businesses leaving to seek other places, whether, people can argue for its tax purposes or whatever other rhetoric they want to use. The reality is people need to be able to attract good talent to come and work. And in St. Louis, we're seeing a lack of those businesses wanting to remain committed. Losing the NFL takes us out of being a big league city. St. Louis, do we want to go the way of Tulsa, or do we want to go the way of other cities that continue to move forward and grow? I understand that there's an investment that needs to be made that requires some funding from the taxpayers. But I would argue that the intangible that comes from being a big league city and having the focus of the NFL is helpful in attracting jobs and talent and population to move to our state and region.
Also, downtown's vacant in February on a Sunday morning. It's not in November if the Rams are there.
No,
there's some economic development benefit.
Absolutely, and this opens up a possibility to open that dome up to bring more tourism in. Right now they have to block out the entire NFL schedule, so we can't compete for conventions to come here during that time. Having another stadium, allowing the Rams to go over there, using tax dollars that's paid for by out-of-towners that's already been allocated, allows us to be able to do that and accomplish this and St. Louis remain a big league city.
Brittany, Burke, if someone come to your office, could you sell this? Could you get a message to sell this to have a voters pass it?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I don't know if it goes to the vote of people. I don't know. I think the current finance deal that's in place, it's been shown that gives money back to the state, back to the city and county indirectly, and then, like Michael said, it tracks economic development indirectly, whether it's from a convention because we now have more access to the current convention center, or because we've got a new dome that can not only have NFL games but other events as well. The saga that played out this week in the legislature, I think, with how is the new dome going to be paid for, quite honestly, I don't think had anything to do with the Rams and the dome and whether or not it should be a debt in the debt service bill or in the economic development bill. I think that saga was more about demonstrating speculation about who's really pulling the strings in House of Probes. And it's created speculation among those of us in St. Louis about what's going to happen.
Representative, will the state be part of financing a stadium?
I think there are two arguments. One, the argument that everybody wants the Rams. Everybody wants the Rams to stay. I don't think there's anybody in the state that wants the Rams to leave. But the second argument is that who should decide that? Should it be our governor or should it be the people in the state? I think the argument from the House, at least from my perspective and my colleagues, our desire is just to make sure that voters have a chance to decide if they want to give $500 million to the NFL to keep a stadium in St. Louis. And I think that's the desire behind it. Let's let voters decide if they want to pay for a stadium ongoing for the next couple decades and give us an opportunity to say whether we want it or not.
Quick hit with you. This week, the House passed out Senator Schmidt's bill to cut speed traps. Some folks have said this could be the greatest way to cut government since the Hancock Amendment. The caps went up. Who is for these speed traps? Who is it?
Well, I think you have some rural areas that have some concerns about it, but
rural Republicans are the ones to point the finger at next time you get pulled over.
Well, possibly, but I think you have, it passed overwhelmingly in the House.
With a higher cap.
With a little bit higher cap from
Who wants to be that extra 5%? I don't want that in my rearview mirror. Right? Is your group helping on this? Are you helping cut government with this harassment?
We're supportive of Senator Schmidt's bill, absolutely. We've been in the fight, and we think it's good policy. You ask about who's for this, it's the city managers, it's the mayors, so on and so forth, and they're the ones that are picking up the phone and lobbying their rural legislators, rural Republican legislators, to encourage them to do it.
You have rural Republicans listening to bureaucrats.
That's correct.
Brittany, Burke, does this pass? What's it look like when it does?
I think it does. I think it's important to remember that the cap was at 30%. The Senate version brought it down to 10%. The House bumped it back up to 15%. I think that extra 5% in revenue might be important if the House bill isn't altered too much because of the changes that are being put in place.
And Mike Kelley, does the Republican Senate win at 10% or the bureaucrats win at 15%?
I don't think either matters. I think we're trying to rein in what's going on with St. Louis municipalities is really what the focus is. And this is just the tip of the iceberg to a more global issue that we need to deal with.
Agreed. And we will talk about that here next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. Thanks for joining us.